Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Iron Canon Podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm coming to you from the Underworld North Studio here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, fresh off Toronto Comic-Con 2024. As always, I'm joined across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. We had so many guests last episode, right? Talking about the acolyte, we had like a whole
Oh,
panel.
yeah. We had three whole guests. We'll get into that in a minute. It was only a few days ago too.
I know.
Shoot,
Weird.
back at you. We're turning right around the corner here on the Iron Cannon Podcast. That's precisely what we're talking about. Anyway, let me tell you a story though. Let me tell you a story. Um, at the height of their powers, the Jedi, they let Darth Sidious. Can you believe this? They let Darth Sidious rise, form the Empire, and wipe them all out. And to think he did it with a single order to a Legion of Clones and something about inhibitor chips and all this other stuff. But that's right. We're talking today. I'm talking all about Order 66, the greatest third act in film history. And just diving right into that. But now I got a few things to get to first, including the plugs. Let's get some of those out of the way. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Iron Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Also here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, we got YouTube memberships, we got super chats, we got a Discord server, the Star Wars Underworld Discord server. Check the link in the description below for that. You will see both Joel and me in there chatting away. Again, my guarantee, you tag Joel in something, you ask him a question, he will answer you, guaranteed. Unless it's of too personal of a nature. But ask him something with Star Wars, something with Marvel. Ask Ben a personal question. That's what you should do. Ask Ben when his birthday is. I'm half joking about that, but yeah, there you go. They're in Discord. Speaking of Discord, what is happening in the Discord these days?
I haven't announced it yet on Discord, but I'll announce it here because I just haven't forgot about it.
Iron Cannon exclusive, guys.
I know, kind of, but that's just me being I haven't had time yet. We are planning on continuing the great Star Wars marathon with more Young Jedi adventures. We really are going to get to Acolyte before we finish up Young Jedi.
Actually.
I'm actually kind of excited. I secretly want this to be the case. I need this to happen. But yes, we hopefully Ben will be able to live stream and we'll be able to do Young Jedi adventures.
There you go. Yeah. So yeah, again, the link in the description below. That's usually kind of in like the audio chat or video chat or something while you guys are watching away. I mean, there is certain film being released in theaters on May 4th, May 3rd, called The Phantom Menace. Came out 25 years ago this year. That's wild. So hopefully maybe you catch up to that or the Acolyte or who knows what. We'll get to the Acolyte a little bit more in a little bit. But another last plug to throw you away. Wednesdays are for comics. Comics are for Wednesdays. Comics are for Wednesdays, whatever order it is. I usually say that in. Chris and I took 2 weeks off, last 2 weeks off for con reasons, legitimately. I was at a con, or I was at a birthday party. Then he was at a con. And now this coming week, we're back. We got 5 books to go through. Thankfully, there's only one comic coming out this week. So coming out this Wednesday, it's the Crash. I forget what it's actually called. High Republic Adventures Crash something one shot. All about Crash Wong. So yeah, one, but that'll just add to the backlog of comics we have to talk about. So thankfully, it's at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday, right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. So we got time, hopefully, to get into it, and we'll go give a run through of that, including Jango Fett #1. Jango Fett, of course, being the official character of the Tractor Beam, both a prequel character and a bounty hunter at the same time.
Yeah, I've heard really exciting things about that one, so I'm excited to get people's takes on it.
Also, a bit of a nod to Ethan Sachs, who's Chris and my first celebrity guest on the Tractor Beam. So he, of course, wrote that book. So yeah, looking forward to diving into everything that's come out in the last few weeks in comics reviews, and possibly talk about Time Road Insider, the Insider short story as well. Keeping up with the adrens, as I like to call it. So keep it locked right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel and wherever you get all these social podcast socials for that as well, for the tractor beam. All right, let's move right along. Not just this week, but last week, last 2 weeks in Star Wars. First thing I'll say about both of us, yes, we had a takeover of the flagship podcast. It was a bit of an Iron Cannon takeover of the Star Wars Underworld podcast. Just a little bit, you and I were up there. We had
Yeah.
the Underworld branding, and Ben led the conversation, but we talked about High Republic on the flag.
Yeah.
Finally, we talked about the Acolyte trailer, and we were able to give our kind of Iron Cannon treatment, just camping out on some ideas and some concepts that are raised in the trailer. So, it was, thank you to Ben and Chris and Hannah for having us on. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty decent discussion, and Dom did pop in for a minute. He was walking through Union Station, but
Gonna take the train.
yeah, he was coming off getting the subway. But yeah, so that was good. So we talked about the Acolyte trailer. So yeah, I'll get back to the rest of my stuff. But what are your thoughts? What are your weekend Star Wars? What are you thinking of, including the being on the flagship and whatnot?
Oh, I mean, that was fun. I love being on the flagship. It's always good time. Good time. For my week of Star Wars this week, I'm gonna go back to our old friend, because it was a discussion we were having of friends of non-Star Wars friends. Sorry, my cat's running around. She got the zoomies.
The cat is welcome on the Iron Cannon podcast anytime.
Oh, I know.
Open door policy for the cat to be a guest here.
Yes, I mean they're gonna jump on me practically. But anyway, me and my some of my buddies who are not Star Wars fans were just chit chatting. We had another discussion about the creative intent and authorial, uh, interpretations of their own work versus the fandom interpretations as well. And one of the reasons I always love bringing up George Lucas quotes isn't because I'm like a secret Lucas purist or originalist and something like
Are
that.
you sure?
Am I sure? Am I?
I'm
But no,
kidding.
I like doing it because I think it's interesting. It's something I think all fans kind of have to deal with to a certain extent when dealing with any creative. Doesn't have to be George himself,
Don't worry about
but
the catch-all. Just
I
ignore
know
the
I'm trying to.
cat.
George himself or just anybody is that these creatives don't always agree with you on things. Um, you know, it- Trust me, you get two people into a room and watch all six of George's films, you're gonna have very different opinions about what Star Wars is and the who's it's and what's it's. Even George himself probably doesn't agree with us about stuff. Like here's kind of my go-to example. Matthew, you're big on the chosen one prophecy. That's your big thing. Um, I wouldn't be shocked if George Lucas came into your house, raiding your fridge, eating your pizza. Um, apart from
You do have a
going,
slice of pizza in there.
apart from going, George, don't eat my pizza. I'm saving that.
No, you
Like
can eat
he,
my pizza. You can
but
have that slice of pizza if you want.
you
No
know,
problem. Anyways,
he asked about the chosen one prophecy.
yeah.
There's part of me that wouldn't be surprised if he goes, "Oh yeah, I just did that for just the lulz. I add a little rum and spice, it's not that important. I'll just make a later, show the one later." It'd be like, oh well, I guess there's George Lucas disagreeing with me about that interpretation of his own work. Um, we talked a little bit about Acolyte because
Mhm.
Leslie Edlund reading one of those big clickbaity article headlines, but I think it's probably the point of like Acolyte going to change what we know about the Jedi and Sith. Dun, dun, dun.
Mhm.
It's like, well, I mean, okay. I mean, it's cool. I like that. That's awesome. But it's like, um, it's like,
Yeah.
will it match up with what George is saying about the Jedi or Sith, or is Leslie Headland going to do her own thing? I'd rather have her do her own thing because I think she's smart and creative, and creators should be allowed to do stuff with the creative freedoms of the Star Wars universe as they like.
Mhm.
It's good, good. So I think about that's why I love bringing up these quotes and like because these different creatives don't always have the same views as us, and
Right.
that's fine. We have to just either we'll take the work as it is and see if we like it or not.
There's the funny kind of churchy parallel, this appeal to tradition, appeal to authority, and it doesn't fly. It really doesn't, like, who's authority? Like, George doesn't want to have authority over Star Wars. He said, yeah, thanks for my cool $4 billion. You go do whatever you want with it. Um, I think the thing I brought up on Thursday night was, as long as well, I'll say, yeah, there are different ways of getting into this, different ways of doing this. I think the one thing as fans we need to hold accountable to the creatives is, does this help young people step out into the larger world and make positive contribution to the community? Right? Is there that real world importance to the story they're telling? And that I think is the one, actually, frankly something that we generally, I think, agree on. Ideally, I hope so.
I hope so.
And then everywhere, however you tell that story, then whatever you do to tell that story, at least as long as you're doing that, that to me is what Star Wars is. That to me is the one quote that George made is, I would say, is Star Wars gospel. Everything
I'm sure there's
else,
somebody out there who disagrees with that.
well, there are lots, and that's the problem, right? It's lots of folks who are all, Star Wars has to be, is this action adventure about Luke Skywalker, or Star Wars is, I don't know, this cool lore about Jedi and Sith, or whatever,
Mortis lore.
Mortis lore, whatever it is, or I mean, here's the thing: Star Wars is about Luke Skywalker getting up in front of the bad guys with a laser sword and taking it all out. Right? That's the problem with that debate, that argument about The Last Jedi, is that doesn't help young people step out into the wider world and make a positive difference. Luke Skywalker staring down his nephew and non-violently force projecting so he can delay him so Rey and everyone can get away. That shows the value of saving what you love as opposed to killing what you hate. And that's why Rian Johnson gets what George Lucas's vision. What I mean by the George Lucas vision, I'm gonna keep dwelling on this. I'm gonna keep, here's my new phrase, camping out on this. That whatever story you tell, as long as you're doing that, as long as you're helping young people be better people, then that's Star Wars to me. And I'm gonna, I mean, yeah, and I'll say this. Then I'm open to telling a story, to seeing a story that goes away from the things I happen to like and happen to like to think about more and happen to understand. Yes, there's this interpretation of, of Return of the Jedi, of the Skywalker saga, that would focus on Anakin being the chosen one, sure. But tell me a story about Rey being the chosen one, then, and
or Leia being the chosen
it.
one,
or Leia being the chosen one, or May. That's the thing. It was why I brought up with the Acolyte, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a story about how the Jedi weren't being were being antithetical, weren't being conducive to young people stepping out and making a positive contribution to their society, their community. Tell me a story about that. And if it's set 100 years before the Phantom Menace and all that, then I'm ready to be challenged. And I hope that's the thing people have gotten out of Star Wars. That's the thing. And that's the sad thing. And I'm going to be kind of incendiary here, is if you're going on YouTube and you're claiming, using the W word, spelled OKE, woke, shudder. If you're going there and you're decrying it, have you really learned to make a positive contribution to your community? I know that's a harsh thing to say on YouTube, but that's what George has always been trying to do. And
no,
I'm going to keep going with that one.
It's funny you say that, because like I'm trying to think of all the creatives we got in Star Wars. It's like I can't really think of any creatives who's like antithetical to that, right? Like,
no, not even JJ was. JJ was still part of that. I'm not denying that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like JJ said Ray should just pack up and go home and just sulk all day. There's the moral lesson. I mean, sure, well, she got up, she kicked Palpatine's butt, and he exploded. And yay, no more evil Emperor.
Yeah.
Hooray! That's a positive to the galaxy.
She found her place in all this, right?
Right. And I'll be honest, if you're a creative who got hired to actually do that, I feel like you probably got a lot of bad views in general, right?
Yeah.
Like
No,
I
that's
can't,
kind of my point. Yeah.
yeah, like I can't think of anyone who's like, I don't give a
Yeah.
yucks about that. Like, who probably isn't that. Maybe the
Yeah.
closest I could think of would maybe be Zack Snyder, but even Snyder's like just weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I can't think of any Star Wars creative they've hired in the last 10 years who's like antithetical to that one thing.
Right.
They go about it in different ways, some more deeply than others, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah.
But still, like, even the Mandalorian is like, he's always helping people. It's like there's a
Mhm.
cat stuck in a tree, Mandalorian. 20 minutes of adventures and monsters just trying to get the cat out of
Pretty
the tree.
literally, that's pretty much that's a few episodes there.
But but yeah, like but yeah,
Yeah.
but he helps the old lady, and it's like he's bitten and bruised. Like, here's your cat, lady. I then it's like
No, it's
off.
Paz Vizsla, here's your son, but
Yeah,
anyway.
here's your son, Paz Vizsla. Oh shoot, now I gotta help somebody else.
Yeah.
More beaten up and shootouts and like and then so it's like, yeah, again, that is kind of interesting. That is sort of the
Mhm.
one thing I can't think that is sort of the one mini unifying thing there. If
I
there
mean,
are unifying things for
yeah,
Star Wars, that's probably one of them.
even Andor,
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's not so young people, but well, part of with Andor is to say
people.
having
Period.
having a positive contribution to your community when your community is under the boot of an evil empire.
It'll be nice
What do
to
you
see
do then?
old people too, like they can still
Yeah.
contribute. So yeah.
Mhm.
But
So,
yeah, that's just something I think about,
mhm.
because I like to say George quotes and like, here's how this doesn't really match up with George's quotes, but
I'll say this, and just one last thing, one last thought about that. I've mentioned this with when Star Trek was in this decline with seasons, most of Enterprise and then early Discovery. Gene Roddenberry. Here's the funny thing, Gene Roddenberry. It's a similar thing, right? With Gene Roddenberry, it's good Star Trek is about imagining a better world. Yeah, I mean, just the same thing to motivate people to go out and actually make it and actually live it and do it. Um, and so that means Star Trek has to be aspirational. That's a great example, I think, of with Enterprise and Discovery of it going away from that, of it losing that until it recaptured it again with season 3. But that's a tangent. Um, but yeah, it happens, right? Things shows really do lose their way because they lose their purpose in the real world. And yeah, you're right. Star Wars has not, and that's why Star Wars has been, I think, under Kathleen Kennedy, has been so consistently good,
Mhm.
is because at the very least it's maintained its purpose. Yeah,
right. So yeah, that's just my week in Star Wars
there we go.
for now.
I got two more things. Two more things. Uh, yeah. So we were on the flagship. Uh, wasn't able to mention Toronto Comic Con. Well, that was fun. So that was last week. So not this past weekend, but the weekend before. Yeah, I say it was a very productive weekend. I was in 3 panels. I was in
Epic.
Dom's panel with Claudia Gray, with Ash and Claudia Gray, and we did a lot of kind of Ion Cannon-esque conversation about the paper to screen pipeline.
Ooh.
Claudia giving her own sort of inside view, and things we may have heard somewhat familiar, but it's always good to hear, the experience of wanting to tell a story and having to tell a story that's connected to what's happening on screen. I mean, the fact we know that with Bloodline, for example, she wasn't able to know too much. Um, but seeing, yeah, the her expressing her own commitment to trying to, well, to tell a story. I forget what the kind of metaphor she uses, but the challenge of telling a story that matters enough to justify it being its own story, but that you can't do so much that it actually changes what's on screen necessarily. And just her, expressing how she walks that tightrope. And so that was that was really fascinating. There was a moment because there was this interesting moment where I was talking about that in terms of just as fans, how we, those of us who say I've read, Kieran Gillen's Darth Vader comic, and um, then seen uh, Twilight of the Apprentice, and then seeing Kenobi, and how the cracked mask and the idea of Anakin dueling Vader,
Hmm.
and just this the fact that we've had this time to sit with this idea versus
Hmm.
people who have had a new experience with it. I've mentioned that on this podcast before.
Right.
But yeah, for Claudia to pick up and say, yeah, the whole thing about writing those kinds of stories without a sense that it's coming on screen, but having to play in the sandbox and play ball. So that was fascinating. And then yeah, Ash and Luai and I did High Republic 101. And that was good. That was hard not to spoil things because it was 101. Hopefully, we're thinking when we apply next time, we'll do High Republic 201 or something. Just uh, actually looking back and spoiling things, just saying this is what happened. This is what we think about it. What we care about it. It is a different animal. 45-minute panel is a different animal than a 2-hour podcast, as you can imagine.
Oh, I'm sure.
But yeah, it was a challenge just to fit everything in. But yeah, I think we did a good overview of just what the High Republic is. I was able to give my little spiel on the different ideas of the High Republic that appeal to me, and then we're able, thankfully, because so when Ash did the panel first, it was during the strike at the Fan Expo in August, and so couldn't talk about Acolyte, couldn't talk about Young Jedi Adventures. We were able to talk about Acolyte uh, in this panel, so that was good too, and connecting those things. So yeah, all in all, definitely a great weekend. Obviously chatting with the cosplayers. Uh, who's the oh my goodness, Wedge Antilles, that
Dennis
actor,
Lawson.
Dennis Lawson. See, things just
Nice.
escaped from my brain. Yeah, Dennis Lawson, he was great. He had a Q&A,
Ooh.
just telling stories, kind of funny because I mean he's only in the, I guess he's in all three films, but kind of remembers kind of vague things and had to pick things up and figure out what to remember, what to recall. And yeah, but he definitely held the crowd well. Um, yeah, as these performers, these actors know how to do. Oddly enough, so multiple panels. This is funny, including Claudia and Dennis and some others. Is Dennis is trained to do musicals, so he
Oh,
dancing,
cool.
singing the whole thing. The idea of a Star Wars musical came up a few times, and so um, maybe that's something's in the works. I mean, there was always AP5 the musical. I joke AP5 musical just at the end of that Rebels episode. But one of my favorite moments in the whole series, and I know it's one of the least liked moments of the whole series, but it's one of my favorite because it's just so ridiculous. Let's do some more of that. Worked for Buffy, worked for Star Trek. Come on, let's figure some way to do it. Let's figure some way to make it work. I know they can. They can figure something out. Maybe involving Lula and Zine, and it's in the High Republic Adventures comic there are musical acts there. So there's music in Star Wars. There's a podcast. There's an episode for you, Joel. Music in Star Wars. There you go. In Star Wars in universe. So
Oh, okay. Hmm.
so yeah, so that was Toronto Comic Con. Thanks again to Fan Expo for getting us in, for giving us the panels. Definitely looking back and saying, yeah, things that worked well, things that I'm going to do differently. That's just how life is with new experiences. Hopefully, hopefully next for Fan Expo they let us do some more. That'd be great. And then yeah, hopefully, I mean we have the recordings, so we'll see what we're able to do with those. But hopefully, oh yeah, and then did the Taylor panel. That was interesting too. Just going in her social impact. Nothing really about Star Wars there, but you know, I think might have fit something in. Maybe next time I'll try and do like Taylor and Star Wars somehow
Oh,
working
nice.
together. I don't know. Anyway, so that was Toronto Comic Con 2024. Yeah, I mean, one last thing I'll say: the way they laid out the space. So one of the concerns, the big concern was the Toronto Metro Toronto Convention Center has a north building and a south building,
Right.
and the north building's a lot smaller, and so this used to be just in the south, but Fan Expo's the whole thing, the whole building.
Right.
whole convention center. But Toronto Comic Con used to be just the South Building. There were other things in the South Building, so now it's just the North Building. And last year they weren't as creative for the space, so it was a lot more crowded.
Mhm.
Not enough places to sit down. This year they really filled it up. They really used up lots of different places. That means they had to. They put the food court in a different place, which was good. That worked. They put. uh they had to split up kind of the cosplay red carpet photo op places, but that's
Right.
okay. People can use escalators and elevators. There are elevators there.
That's good.
So yeah. So yeah, it was definitely easier. It's still wasn't the best. There still needs to be a bit more seating around, but
Mhm.
I'll mention that. Probably do a feedback survey about that. But otherwise, yeah, that was good. And then again, just want to say they got Claudia Gray, right? Which I
Right.
wasn't expecting at all. That's the first time I think since Charles Soule they've actually invited a Star Wars book author, but first time they've invited specifically a book author.
Oh, that's
Um,
nice.
I think so. I mean, so because E.A. Johnston, she was invited by the 501st a number of years ago, but never specifically for a panel. I don't think so. So this was a nice change, and hopefully that keeps going as well. So like all three panels were pretty full, which is nice
Mhm.
to see. Claudia had her own Q&A, and that was also pretty full, which was nice
Right.
to see. So
That's cool.
yeah, yeah, all in all, a pretty good weekend, pretty productive weekend. There you go. So yeah, one last thing. Uh, theology time. Just gonna get that up a little bit. Just a fun little note. This week is Holy Week. Easter is coming up, and yesterday was Palm Sunday, which marks Jesus going into Jerusalem, and this is the start of the beginning of the end, the actual beginning of the end, leading towards
Mhm.
the crucifixion. And how Palm Sunday is this sort of this is just this parallel, this connecting with the sermon yesterday that priest gave. Um, Palm Sunday, Jesus rides into town on a donkey. It's meant to be small, inconspicuous, out of the way. What do donkeys and X-wings have in common? Just these small, out of the way things that use the arrogance and oversight of the empire to take out the empire. And so that was a fun thought. I'm gonna keep probably thinking about that. Maybe do something more for next year. But
Well, if
yeah.
Jesus wanted to be really in the Star Wars vein, he would have, be with the Emperor and go like, "What have I done?" Then you are forgiving. I would like to say, Anakin's a space Jesus if he became a Roman.
Yeah, I mean, I have a whole for Christ's sake, Anakin. I should find that episode, just the whole thing, the whole kind of reflection on that. But yeah, it was a kind of funny, kind of interesting thought I had yesterday, as you do during the
As you
sermon,
do.
as you do.
Oh.
Uh, all right. Let's get back up here. Um, very quickly. Since again we talked a bit about it on the flagship on Thursday. Yeah, but Bad Batch season 3 episode 8. Let's do a bit of eyes on screen here. Any more thoughts, Joel, on the episode from because we didn't have that much time to talk about it on Thursday.
Gonna be
Yeah.
honest, no, not even. That's what I'm glad. Just fun episode. I really like seeing Crosshair deal with PTSD.
Yeah.
That's always nice. See a little weight behind some actions
Hmm.
of the past, and wondering if we're getting closer to Ventress showing up. I
I
got
think
like, yeah.
did was it Christy Golden tweeted out something about uh Christy Golden, right? Not Beth Webb, Christy Golden.
Yeah, that'd be
Tweeted out
pretty
something
cool.
about Dark Disciple, how it's available on Amazon or whatever, on Kindle or whatever.
I don't know. I don't think we follow her on Twitter, but that's okay. If
I'm
maybe they're hinting at it.
I'm sure we do, but yeah.
Maybe it's getting close to that time. Maybe it's Ventress time's coming up.
Yeah, that's a good question. Is where is this heading now?
Hmm.
Again, I like the episode. I'm gonna repeat a little bit what I said. Is the episode does a good job expressing what these characters, what Omega means to Hunter and Wrecker, um, what Omega might mean to Fennec. You never know. And then of course showing Omega with Crosshair, that just the compassion and patience. Yeah, these are fighters, but yeah, Omega is a clone she's trained to, or she's learning to use that crossbow thing. But yeah, she also has the wisdom to slow down and stop, and tell Crosshair to slow down and stop, and literally, smell the flowers and literally breathe. um, and so it was a really good character episode, and I think it'll come back just like, just like we see, with the Purgil with
Well, they are
Ezra.
setting things up. I mean, you got the mysterious person Fennec is talking to. Like,
That's true too. That is true too.
that's pretty obvious. That's being set
Yeah.
up for next week.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I can see why people were frustrated by it, but um, yeah, I think the character beats in this episode will reverberate through the rest of the season. Again, just like with the Purgil, with Ezra, right? His ability to connect with them, that reverberated for sure in the biggest way. Also, all the way into another whole series. So
Yeah, exactly.
I think with these character moments with Omega and about Omega, we're gonna see. So only 2 days to go. Thankfully, that's the thing. It's only coming out every week. And then, so for folks who haven't seen it, you can binge it. It's there on Disney Plus to binge it if you want. So there's that. Any last thoughts on Bad Batch season 3, episode 8?
Nope, can't wait to see what next week's all about.
Fun times. All right. Speaking of things coming up, again, a few things I want to pick up. I just want to mention this. We, again, on the flagship, we did spend lots of time talking about this, and that was great. But I want to say, I wanted to show this because this didn't get this. I almost said human. This Mary Allen didn't get didn't get. That needs a bit more time. So we were able to talk a bit about her and where she's at in phase 3, and kind of speculating about what kind of insights and experience she might be bringing to the acolyte, and to experience about questioning the order and having a bit of distance from the order.
Or
Now
she
that
could be a member of the Jedi Council.
she could be, but I mean, that'd be an interesting thought. I don't know. I kind of hope
she might be
not.
all in. She might be all in on the Jedi Order this time.
Again, I kind of hope not. I hope she serves. Maybe that's just because this is what many speculating. She could be. I could be wrong, but she could be. What am I saying? What I speculated is she could be just, if there is any sort of character story influence from the books, it's that she is going to could be this voice of reason and sobriety to say the order isn't all it's chalked up to be. The order isn't always, you know, what it was, what it once was, what it claims to be, or to say, being so gung ho and taking the fight to the Nile wasn't necessarily the best thing. But also, I mean, I'm a few chapters into Defy the Storm, and there she is. I won't spoil too much, which she's off taking action kind of independent of the order, and we'll see how that goes for her. Also, remember phase 1, she meets Mari Santeca, and has this ability to connect to the paths and to connect to hyperspace, and has these force visions, especially while in hyperspace, but not necessarily. And so, again, I don't no idea if any of this will come up in the Acolyte, but that she's there, where it gets our heads spinning about, what is the paper to screen pipeline with this character. So I don't. Do you have any more thoughts on our favorite Mary Allen Jedi Master?
Well, maybe not thoughts on her specifically, but I got thoughts on like just the general thing that kind of links to that. Is like, we don't actually really know what the state of the order is in. I mean, they don't really say. I mean, this trailer doesn't give much away.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
It's all vibes, right? But we're kind of assuming things about what the state of the Jedi Order is, and we might be very wrong for all we know. So I think that's kind of where I'm kind of interested in terms of like if Vern's under council or not. Like,
Yeah.
where does the Jedi Order? Where is the Jedi Order starting here? Right? Like,
Right.
like for all we know, they might be pretty feeling good about themselves today. Like, yeah, you got just doing Jedi
Woke
stuff.
up.
What?
They woke up, had a good breakfast, you know.
Yeah, I had good coffee. For like again, we don't know. I mean, they still got the white robes and the gold and the fancy flags
Yeah.
around the temple. So I think that's something we have to consider too. Is that
Yeah.
we don't know
Yeah.
what the state of the Jedi is, or how they're feeling, or what the galaxy feels. So
Yeah.
I think that's something we have to take into account as well. Which obviously the trailer doesn't really give away.
No.
It just gives vibes. So it's like
It
you
gives
know
vibes. It gives
we
costume.
his costume. Maybe I'm sure the series will at least maybe have some terminology. Um,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked about that.
Right.
Like what are the vibes of the
Mhm.
Jedi counts of the Jedi Order at this time in the beginning, right? Like obviously they're talking about this is where the decline starts, but it's like,
Yeah.
well, if the Nile didn't really impact the decline that much as we think they did, then maybe the Jedi Council is feeling good. They still got some temples around the galaxy and outposts and whatnot.
Right.
I mean, we don't know. We'll find out in June. So
Well, we'll
that's
also
just
find out in a few weeks with Living Force.
that too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we will see.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think about too, about when it comes to that in
Yeah.
particular.
I mean, I mentioned Living Force because even just on the eve of the Phantom Menace, there are other outposts like on Quen. I mean, that one's being decommissioned, but yeah, again, that's again the paper. What's the paper to screen pipeline here? It's an interesting point in that it's a good reminder not to assume too much linearity with history.
Exactly.
Things can go in every
Or
which way,
inevitability. Or
or
inevitability.
inevitability. That's a tricky thing though. Is so one thing I will say is you asked me on Thursday about the vesture, about
Mhm,
the robes, and it did seem like this transitional thing, right? You even
mhm,
see this picture here. She's wearing the gold of the temple garb,
mhm.
but the brown of the field garb.
Right.
Um, Seems like and even the younglings in the temple, they don't have the white tabards. They have kind of the more farm like uh simple, humbler robes. And that again, is that an intentional choice to say this is different from the books? Or is that an intentional choice to say this is just what we know from the movies? We don't know that. I'd love to hear. I mean, that's the thing. I'll be really curious to hear all the behind the scenes for this one to say,
That'd be fun.
oh yeah, we saw the concept art for the Light of the Jedi, and we saw these comic books, and we said, okay, we're gonna move that forward 100 years and trying to meet it up. Just like, I mean, for example, with in the prequels with ship designs, taking the TIE fighter, scaling it back and making it a Jedi Actus. What does that look like?
Mhm.
Again, who knows, right? That's the question. We have Vern, we have the gold. Um, so we'll see. We have Leslie Headland saying maybe season two, if there's a season two, which is another new thing. What else? Who else might show up? Obviously, I mentioned Yoda and Yaddle and Oppo and all these other characters that are still around by at this point. But yeah, maybe I don't know. Maybe there's a Stellan mention or an Elzar mention or an Avar mention or
Wayseeker,
you know,
Pathfinder, Nile.
yeah. Well, and if anyone says the word Wayseeker, it would be Vern right here
Right.
because so of those mentions, but yeah, again, it raises these questions and it gets us spinning, gets our heads going, and of
Mhm.
course that's what they want
Sure.
us to be on YouTube chatting about this. Yeah, it's a lot of questions. Again, you make a good point about not assuming linearity, not assuming too much inevitability, even though we know where the story lands up. You know,
Well, that's just the problem of fiction.
that's the problem with fiction. It's the problem with prequels.
Yeah.
Uh, Generally, you're right. But if they do, if this is on an up, if this is on a resurgence, I'd want to know why. If they are feeling good about themselves in 100 years after the Nile threat, 100 years before the Sith threat really begins,
Mhm.
and I know there's been lots of discussion with the red lightsaber or whatever. Um, why are they feeling good about themselves now when, again, if they're paying attention, if Leslie Headland really wants to take into account the Guardian protocols and the reeling from the fall of Starlight Beacon,
Mhm.
why are they feeling good of themselves? Again, maybe the way Phase 3 ends, there is this. I mean, that's that question you've raised
Mhm.
before. What tone does the publishing initiative end on? Does it end on a triumphant tone? Does it end on a chastened tone, but a calm confidence? Oh, we actually figured this one out. And we did it. However, we did it. Is it through the Wreath method or the Aslan Rel method? We don't know which one of those two are gonna. Probably some combination of the two. The more research heavy, peaceable, how to appease the nameless, or Aslan, just let's take them all out. Let's burn their home, destroy Planet X or something. We know. I doubt they go that far, but
If they went
yeah,
that far, I feel like they would have fallen a lot sooner.
sure,
Um,
right. And so yeah, it's a great question. So I don't know. Any further thoughts on this? Yeah.
one thing I just want to bring up because we were talking a little bit about it on our messages.
Yeah.
So you know me, I'm not a big fan of the idea of the Nile working for the Sith. Not a fan.
Right.
I don't. But here's the thing: you can do it in a way that doesn't annoy me, where you just say,
Right.
where like if you just want to say like, the Sith just signed a check and it's like here are the checks to all these rebel groups we've been sending throughout the
Yeah.
last it's not just denial, like we send the checks out to everybody. Then
Literally through the banking clan and all that, right?
yeah,
Like when I'm
exactly. Yeah,
asking them. Yeah.
yeah, or like, yeah, hey, this rebel group is trying to do something. We'll send them some intelligence or something.
Yeah.
That's fine. And then the Sith
Yeah.
realize, oh shoot, these now got farther than we thought. I don't know how. Like they're crazy. Like I don't know if we want to go that far with them. Maybe we
Mhm.
should pull back. Just kind of wait and see. That's fine. But don't do the Trade Federation and Phantom Menace where Marcion Rowe is like
Yeah.
contacting Lord Edgelord in the back of his room secretly, and he's
Yeah.
palpatining it up. Like don't do that. But like if you want to have like the Sith say, oh yeah, we supported all sorts of rebel groups like the Blink terrorists, the Nile, the Jedi haters, the
Yeah.
Jedi suck cult. Like do that. That's fine. Because that's what the Sith do. They've been supporting a bunch of different people just
Mhm.
to poke and prod at the Republic for the last 1,000 years. So
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah. I mean,
That's that's
I
my
would be like,
baseline.
I hope they didn't hear about the path of the open hand. Like they like to have nothing to do with that at all and be like, oh, there's this group that's opposing like you're saying, oh, this
Mhm.
the Nile. Let's actually help them out. Yeah, because it would be we already have two Skywalker saga trilogies where that kind of thing happens, right? Like you mentioned, that's the story of the prequels, and it was great. It was brilliant with George doing that. And then yeah, you have with JJ, you have the Sith Eternal backing the First Order in the shadows of the First Order. That one's obviously more explicitly we're the new empire, but still, it's still this sort of kind of shadow thing. Then they finally come to the forefront.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. I really hope it is more subtle and it'll be more interesting to
Right.
say. Yeah, they're still waiting. They're still biding their time. Maybe the Nile give them a pause and give them a question. That'll be interesting to
That'd be
say.
cool.
Is now the time? Is now the time we show up? Uh, and then they decide, no, this is just the beginning of the end. Let's wait 200 years. Then they'll be ready to go. You
I
know?
don't even think they might be thinking at the beginning of the end. I think,
Yeah,
if anything, I think that if I mean, this is me kind of taking various Sith things
sure.
I know from Legends, but this is also my thinking. I think they look at the Nile and go, "Oh, they're gonna peter out." Like I would not be shocked if
Yeah.
the Sith look at the Nile and they say, "Oh, these guys are gonna self-destruct." Like the Jedi will kick their butts eventually.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be some deaths, but they kind of see the Republic and the Nile, and they're like, "Oh, you guys will peter out.
Yeah.
You are just waiting to have an internal civil war, and you'll just collapse on your own." So it's like I could see them like making their bets, like, "Yeah, the Nile Jedi are probably gonna win in the long run. These are probably not the horse to back."
Yeah. I mean, and as we maybe this is because this is the story we got from
Hmm.
George, but I mean the ultimate revenge of the Sith
Hmm.
is that the Jedi
Hmm.
uh they they turn in on themselves and they do this to themselves, or they let it happen to themselves, right? Uh,
Right.
as opposed to this external threat doing it to them.
Right.
Yeah,
The Republic kills. The Republic turns on them.
it can't be this full on
Mhm.
like a frontal assault. It has to be
Right.
from within.
The Republic stabs in the back.
So yeah, so June 4th, only on Disney Plus. The countdown to the 2-episode premiere at 6 p.m. Eastern. No, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, June 4th. I'm so glad they're bringing that back too. They should have done that with
Hooray!
Bad Batch.
I
Like,
think
come
we all
on.
know secretly why, because it's animated.
I
At least,
know, but come on, that's nonsense.
but at least this is live action. Well, at least this is good. Well, that's good. At least that this is gonna get a
Yeah.
good date.
So the web StarWars.com has a countdown. Time of me talking right now, 70 hours, 70 days. That would be nice. 70 hours, 70 days, 23 hours, 43 minutes, 25 seconds until the 2-episode series premiere drops. So looking forward to it. It's gonna be yeah, we're gonna do all the things. We're gonna do all the things here at the Iron Cannon podcast.
Woo!
The Acolyte.
The
You know,
sings.
again, it's why Ben was all, yeah, the perfect time to bring us on. We're gonna eyes on screen when this show is on is gonna be a lot longer and a lot more substantial.
We might just do whole episode reviews, maybe.
Possibly.
I don't know. We'll
Yeah,
have to.
we'll see what
We'll
we do.
decide. We'll
So
decide.
yeah, but yeah, looking forward to some sort of sense of the beginning of the end here. But yeah, so looking for that. I'm seeing something. I'm seeing this this message. I'm getting
Yeah.
it from somewhere. I don't know.
We're getting a message. Let me put it on screen for you, Matthew.
Okay. I think it's it looks like coming from straight from Coruscant.
Ion Cannon podcast. The time has come. Execute Order 66. Good soldiers follow orders. Good soldiers follow orders. Oh, da, 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 da. Yeah. Or if we play the music. Yes.
The copyrighted music.
Yes. Order 66. Here we go. All right. Let's do this. Order 66. As you say, the climactic beginning of the third act of Revenge of the Sith. And in my opinion, one of the most important turning points of this original 6-movie Skywalker saga.
Opinion,
Well, yeah, I mean, that's probably
the way
everyone.
the story is. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. This is the first turning point of the original 6-movie Skywalker saga, and I'm saying 6-movie because I feel like that's kind of more of the intent there. To me, it's the first is Order 66. Second is the destruction of the first Death Star. But yes, Order 66. Okay. Yes, I know. All right. Let's begin. What is Order 66? Let's ask that question. What is Order 66? So Order 66, for the laymen out there, I don't know if we have any laymen who watch, or women, or thems,
laypersons
who watch the show. But if they do, welcome to Star Wars. This is where the madness happens. Order 66 is the kickoff, the true kickoff of the Jedi Purge. Yeah, there's debate on whether or not it's the Purge itself, or if the Purge is this ongoing thing that kind of doesn't really end until the Empire's gone. But it's certainly the initial kickoff. And again, this is from the Plagueis novel, but I like using this because I think it can apply. The genius of the plan is basically, the idea is, okay, get the masters, get the council members first, like kill them off, kill all the council members, and then strike at the temple, and then once you've done that, basically all you got left are stragglers, Padawans, people who are really not going to be a major threat to you and your Sith Empire order, and you kill them off with one stroke. Because again, Order 66 does not kill all the Jedi, as some fans might think, but it kills off a good chunk of them. So you have 10,000 Jedi reduced to 100. It's actually quite a lot, and that's not enough to deal with your new evil regime of evil. So yeah, Matthew, I'll toss it to you. what is your take on Order
Yeah,
66 in universe, and kind of my description of the plan, the only plan that
right.
matters?
So it's a synecdoche. If you know what the term means. You know how we use one kind of smaller moment to refer to the larger moment.
Right.
It's
Actually,
it's
never heard that word, so this is a new word for me.
but you've heard it used. So for example, you know, Washington has debated this, or whatever, the Beltway in the Beltway, for
Mhm.
example, referring not literally to the highway, but to American politics, right?
Right.
That's the example that comes to mind a lot, right? Um, you've seen it spelled like synecdoche or whatever, synecdoche. So yeah, that's kind of what it is. So it is effectively the purge
Mhm.
because yeah, like you say, going from 10,000 to 100.
Mhm.
Sure, they're 100 Jedi, so that's enough to take out the Empire again eventually. But I mean, that's the thing is for 1,000 generations, the Jedi were the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy until the Dark Times, until the Empire, until Order 66, and it is they got the vast majority. They got the Council, they got the Masters, they
Except for
got
Yoda and Obi-Wan.
except for Yoda and Obi-Wan, but they got most of the Masters. Yeah.
Yep.
Um, they they but they got the Council itself, and they got the Order itself, and
Right.
that's why. I mean, it's not just the George Lucas films, right?
Mhm.
Ray is dealing with this in her film coming up, right? The fact that there is no Jedi Order for her to join
Can't be
until
a
she
joiner.
actually restarts something is because of Order 66 primarily. And
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's the moment that
Mhm.
it's the moment that Luke is referring to at the height of their powers, wiped them out. Literally, that's what Darth Sidious himself says, wipe them out, all of them in the
We said in episode 1, but
oh sure. I hear it in my head. I hear it in my head.
I know.
Uh show no mercy, Lord Vader, go to
Do
the
not
temple.
hesitate, show no mercy.
Yeah. Um and so yeah, the it yeah, again, I mean it is a synecdoche, but it's the thing that comes to mind. That's how a synecdoche works. Is it's the moment that comes to mind because and how
Mhm.
it works, of course, is because uh it is the ultimate reason why Palpatine wanted all the Jedi to be embedded into the clone army, into the
Mhm.
generals of the clone army. You got to trust your troops. You got to trust your men. You got to trust your people. And if he can flick a switch in their head to say, "Oh, go kill your general,"
Mhm.
then yeah, it gets them in the wrong place at the wrong time, as we see to such dramatic effect in Revenge of the Sith and in so many
Oh,
other places that we'll go
oh,
into.
of course.
But yeah, it's I mean that's why I keep thinking then with the High Republic, for example, or with the Acolyte, what we were saying, it is the fulfillment of the main plan to destroy the Jedi.
Mhm.
And
Uh,
so, yeah, they're good.
yeah, one thing I want to talk about a little bit before we get into like the dramatic out of universe stuff. We'll talk
Yeah.
about a little bit of the more in universe stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and talk a little about the legality. I know it's weird to say
Yeah.
legality of killing. Well, I mean Um, this is more in the Revenge of the Sith novelization by Matthew Stover.
Sure.
Go read it; it's good stuff.
Mhm.
Um, there's a great scene, and I really gotta show you this.
Mhm.
It's Yoda, Mace Windu, and Obi-Wan, and they're talking about, the politics of the Republic, what's going on.
Mhm.
They're not happy. Palpatine's consolidating more and more emergency power. And this is actually a little bit in the deleted scenes. Um, the novel goes into it really great, where it's like
Mhm.
the Senate's about to give Palpatine direct command over the Jedi Council,
Right.
and where legally, if Palpatine wants to, he can disband the Jedi Order. He can, it's like, okay, Jedi Order, you are legally disbanded as a Republic institution.
Right.
And Yoda makes a very interesting point because they don't know that what's coming for them is death per se. Um, but Yoda is like, Yoda and Mace are talking like, wait, really, you can do that? And Yoda is like, If Palpatine disbands the Order, Jedi we will still be. It'd be like if if like the United States just or if Rome declared, okay, the Christian Church, you're officially disbanded.
Hmm.
Like, what about all these Christians? You're like, you're not going to stop being Christian just because your
Sure.
Christian club membership no longer works. You don't longer
Yeah.
get the free sodas. Um,
That's how that works. Free sodas. But
exactly.
yeah.
And I think it's sort of interesting that
Mhm.
uh, or but hey, Order 66 is a legal thing. It is the contingency in
Mhm.
case any Jedi goes rogue,
Yeah.
and oh shoot, what we gotta do.
Mhm.
Um, of course, I mean that is what Dooku tells the Kaminoans, like, only Sifo Dyas and myself know that in case one of us Jedi goes crazy, we put this little thing in here to make sure that they will kill the Jedi on sight. Um,
Mhm.
but I think that's sort of interesting, kind of from the Jedi perspective, that worst case scenario for them at first was like, oh, Palpatine's gonna disband the Order and make it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they talk about like the illegal, just officially disbanded, in
Yeah.
terms of
Just
like
the
the,
institution being,
and it's sort of like, well, what? I guess we just all go to a planet in the Outer Rim and just start build up again, or just hang out there, because that's actually something I've thought about a lot.
Mhm.
I don't want to turn this too much into Jedi Republic discussion, but it is something I
Yeah.
think about. Is okay, what would the Jedi be doing if they weren't part of the Republic, right? Because I feel like you know,
Yeah.
like they the alliance was made, and that's why they get involved. Um, and it's kind of funny that at least from like the Lucas Star Wars stuff, Lucas is almost saying like keep the church and state separate, but more like, "Oh, no politicians are going to take down the priest. Save the priest. The politicians are the ones who are going to ruin it all." Instead of either the state and the church taking each other down.
Yeah.
Um,
It's interesting. Yeah.
but obviously, Palpatine, he's got no like Palpatine's like, don't worry, Jedi, I know what to do with your employment. So,
Good for employment.
I know, but it is kind
Yeah.
of interesting. Like, it's not just Palpatine's like Order 66, and then we're like, wait, what happened to all the Jedi? It's like, oh no, well, first I have to incite a coup, make it look like the Jedi are overthrowing me.
Yeah.
Then use my legal emergency powers that the Senate voted for me to officially disband the Jedi Order. Um, and then, because the Jedi have essentially cooed me or tried to coup me, I can
Yeah.
then execute Order 66. And, it's like, I had to do that, It's like, I had to do that. I had to kill all the Jedi because they're enemies of the state. Instead of
Yeah.
just, I don't know, they maybe thought, disband the Order and then, like, okay, Jedi, you got to relocate. Get out of Coruscant, go to Tython or something. So, yeah, thoughts on all this?
Yeah. No, that is interesting. I mean, I didn't think about him disbanding the order because that would be give them a legal cover to say we're not enemies of the Republic. We're just separate doing our own thing.
Mhm.
Um, the point. Well, I'll say the legality of Order 66 is that he's declared them to be enemies of the Republic, just like the Separatists are.
Right.
They're traitors, just like the Separatists are.
Mhm.
So they can be killed by the clone army, just like the Separatists can. And the inhibitor chip was to ensure that they obey that. Obviously, I mean that's the thing is
Mhm.
Mace and Obi-Wan and Yoda. I'm guessing that's an adaptation of or version of the scene around the hall projector, or just in that council meeting
Yes, actually, it is, but a bit
where,
longer.
but like I sense a plot to destroy the Jedi. You
Yes.
um, we have to take control of the Senate and all that. Like the Jedi wouldn't go along with being disbanded, right? That's the thing. Yeah, legally, whatever, but they just take actions to stop it and to block it.
Well,
And
that's
so,
actually I
I don't think
mhm,
they go along with it at all. So
mhm,
there's that. I mean, so then there's also the question,
mhm,
um, by this point, you know, what well, this raises your question,
mhm.
church and state, who are the Jedi if not the guardians of peace and justice in the Republic, right? Who are they? And that's an interesting question that we're gonna raise with the Ray film. Like, I think he's
Hopefully.
gonna go into, what does it mean to be a Jedi without a Republic? Just like the New Republic is wrestling with what does it mean to be a Republic without the Jedi?
Mhm,
It's an interesting point you do raise about how,
mhm,
during the Bush administration, a lot of the uh, a lot of the critique was, and definitely with Trump too.
Mhm.
You have all these looser, interestingly, these evangelicals who have a looser organization, looser structure than Catholics and others. Uh, by the way, but still having all this influence and power in government to direct certain policies. The usual. Uh, George is reminding us the effect that has on people of faith and on religious institutions, right? That is that they sell their soul for to be able to pass this bill that you and I also happen to agree is wrong in terms of marriage rights and things like that.
Right.
Um, but to say, okay, then losing the whole plot about or just things that well that's the funny thing. They I for a number of decades, I thought these specific issues, boutique issues, were the things that mattered. And it's not that the issues themselves don't matter, but for government to legislate on certain aspects of human morality or whatever.
Mhm.
Again, I've changed, I've shifted even my own view of those things, right? Equal marriage, etc., and gender identity, etc. But uh, that's not even the thing that conservative Republicans care about, right? They don't
Mhm.
care about abortion and same-sex marriage. They don't give two hoots about it. At least the ones with any kind of power. They're just using that in order to garner votes and to stir up a base. You
Maybe
know,
some with power probably do. You always are gonna have true believers.
you'll have a few true believers, sure, but um, you know, they completely sacrifice the true believers themselves sacrifice themselves for all these other policies that really end up hurting everybody.
Tax
And
cuts.
tax cuts, right?
Mhm.
And thinking that that's the Christian thing. So it's fascinating to remember
Mhm.
George was issuing a warning. I even remember Obama talking about this during the 2008 campaign. That separation of church and state was meant to protect the churches. And I can also go into, okay, we still want to talk about what it means for churches to have a positive influence on society, and we don't want to have I've talked about not having the bald faced secularism that denies those convictions, but um you know to say, yeah, Order 66, it's this ultimate image of what happens, right? How when we care too much about power. I mean, there we go back and forth about the whole how were the Jedi corrupted. They put themselves in this position where Order 66 was possible, you know, and they were allowed it to happen, and it's a long centuries long process. It's not like we can say Yoda is being a villain for letting Order 66 happen, but yeah, it's this really
Mhm.
important point of saying, you know, why have we tied our identity to this institution? Can we say, hold on, at least say, okay, let's understand the historical reasons for it. This is the thing what Sophia and I were getting at.
Mhm.
You know, our church has these historical ties to the British Empire and to now the wealthiest parts of American society and Canadian society. We're in a moment of reckoning and it's having to say, hold on, you know, there are some aspects about that can be good and beneficial of saying, yeah, we can actually, the Bishop of Toronto can book a meeting with the mayor and say, hey, this housing policy, this transit policy, uh, here's what we think about it. But also to say, um, you know, what are we, to the prestige and the wealth and the trappings of that, or does that cause us to lose who we are as well? So yeah, that to me, I mean, going on bit of a tangent there, but um, yeah, I mean, Order 66 being this ultimate symbol of selling our soul to the devil.
It's certainly
Mm.
interesting. I guess the state is the devil in this case because it's like here's
Well,
the thought.
Palpatine is the devil, right?
That's true. I mean, they didn't know
Yeah.
Palpatine was. They thought he was just a corrupt politician.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true. Like they couldn't. That's another thing. They could not predict Order 66, which fair enough. It's a great plan. You
I
know?
know. Here's a question though. It's something
Yeah.
you brought up, but I kind of think it's interesting.
Mhm.
Reason the Jedi tried to coup Palpatine basically was not because he was going to disband the Jedi. I mean, God Mooney said itself. If he does not give up his emergency powers after the Grievous's destruction, he should
Mhm.
be removed from office.
Yeah.
The war is over. Why aren't you essentially getting
Mhm.
rid of your executive emergency powers that this
Yeah.
executive isn't supposed to have and restore senatorial democracy and oversight over
Right.
everything? Um, and so my point was, you know, I wonder, if the Senate, as it should be, not as under emergency powers with Palpatine,
Mhm.
disbanded the Jedi Order. If the Jedi are treated like, well, that's democracy. They're not going to Order 66
Mhm.
us. Well, we might just guess we move back to Tython. That's not a republic planet. Guess we all go home. Guess we all go out. Guess we all leave.
I guess they just wouldn't disband the Order, right? Because I mean, the Jedi until Palpatine, until the Clone Wars, the Jedi are still pretty popular.
Well, that's true. I mean, what if the Senate just did like one day, like, okay, Senate as it should be, no Palpatine. Like
Yeah.
Felicia was like, okay, Senate, vote to disband the Order. You win. Okay, Jedi probably like, well, shoot, guess we go home. Like, I don't see them trying to
Yeah.
overthrow the Senate just because they got disbanded. It was a very specific reason why they had to do
Yeah.
what they thought they had to do.
Well,
And
yeah.
obviously, when they find out Palpatine's, a Sith Lord of the evil, ontologically evil religion that they all
Sith Lord.
hate, that's when they had to, lightsabers out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Trying to think.
it's an interesting scenario
Yeah.
that I can't really think.
Well, this is what I think. What here's what we need. We have the original trilogy Infinities,
Hmm.
Revenge of the Sith Infinities. You um, the coup succeeds. What then? Do the Jedi does Chancellor Mace Windu relinquish emergency powers, or does he declare himself emperor?
I kind of probably not. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's a good
Well,
question.
I mean,
Yeah,
the other thing is like, well, what does the author writing it want to do? That's
exactly.
another problem with these
That's
what if situations. Is like,
yeah,
well, what does the author want to say, right? Like,
yeah.
there's
Well,
no
that's the
logic
main
behind
point. Is what the author wants to say.
it.
There was something I was going to respond what you were
Oh,
saying before, but yeah, I don't know. I forget if it comes back to me.
well,
Yeah,
okay. But yeah, I always find it again kind of funny. You mentioned that Obama quote.
yeah,
That is kind of Star Wars, right? Like, who always gets in trouble when the state and the religion get together? It's always the Jedi who
yeah.
get purged
Well,
again and
in the one
again.
story, I don't know. Well, I guess in Legends, is there other story examples of that, or
Oh yeah, Republic and Jedi always kind of have a back and forth, especially when they're because it's here's the thing,
Mhm.
you know, it's not the Jedi who do bad stuff. It's always the Republic who does bad things,
Right.
and I think this is where the whole Lucas doesn't see the Jedi as flawed kind of
Yeah.
question comes in. Is like, George was like, the Senate, don't trust them. Those
Mhm.
politicians, Palpatine, even Padme, she's a politician, don't trust her. But Jedi,
Mhm.
they're a ontologically good thing.
Like Obi-Wan, she's a politician, Anakin.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I remember what I was gonna say is, well, first off, the response to what you're saying is,
Mhm.
yeah, it's just it's not corruption necessarily. It's just realism, right? The
Right.
realism of politics is having to play the game and do what you got to do.
And not
Whereas,
enjoy it. And they don't and Jedi don't like doing that.
well, no, as in the Senate,
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
senators, and even even Mon Mothma, we see Mon Mothma playing the game in Andor, for
Right.
example. Um, in the middle of the Empire,
Mhm.
Mon Bale, Padme, having to play the game and get their hands not too dirty, but make the tough calls, make the compromising calls.
Mhm.
Whereas the Jedi are meant to be the great ideal, the great beacon of like you said, ontological good
Right.
by expressing that, Qui-Gon's great line, because it is the light. I
Exactly.
think I was today watching for my day job, just watching a little documentary uh on a priest in France in 17th century,
Mhm.
and how just the connection he has a connection like back to St. Francis of Assisi, and giving up, and the order, the community that he was a part of, this priest, this Nicolas Barret,
Mhm.
uh, part of the Minims, and they what are they? They have this perpetual Lent where they don't eat meat, uh, they don't eat dairy.
Mhm.
They give up. I mean, that's the whole thing with the St. Francis thing, is to give up all that. Doesn't really necessarily come at a material cost to the Pope and bishops or whoever, but it says to some Pope and bishops and whoever, the way you're living may not be as as conducive. Definitely to the civil leaders, right?
Right.
Say could be this challenge to them, but then having to collaborate, and so it's the tension between the pure ideal and the realism of getting practical things done,
Right.
that I think George is playing with there, with corrupt senators, and not just corrupt senators, but the the realist senators. The one thing I was going to say, speaking of senators, though,
Mhm.
is um in the Rising Storm by
Right.
Kevin Scott. Here's a an attempt at a bit of disentanglement, but also to say, we don't
Mhm.
necessarily need the Jedi. Tia Toon, the senator,
Right.
you know, and he's very clear. He doesn't. He
He's
likes the
not a
Jedi.
Sith Lord. He's not a.
He likes the Jedi. He thinks they're great.
Yeah. Right.
He just thinks that local planets should be able to take care of themselves more because
Right.
they have a better sense of what's going on the ground. And he's right. He's a thorn in the side to Lena So's whole "we're all the Republic" and
Mhm.
unity, and let the Jedi be the beacon of unity. Um, and so be part of the political rhetoric, and his strategy has to be a little bit more needly. But he makes this important point. What if, here's a what if.
Mhm.
What if his ideas were taken more seriously? What if the Jedi were more free to be separate from the concerns of the Republic so much? And maybe that's the thing with the Nile, is that they actually provoke more intertwining. That's one of the things I think we're seeing. I mean, that's interestingly, hadn't thought of that so much, but as Phase 3 continues here, as the Jedi becomes so key to ending the Nile threat.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that the Sith are looking at. Oh, interesting. There's this thing that's provoking the Jedi to be so embedded and so allied so closely with the Republic by being their saviors, being the saviors of the Republic. And so then 200 years later, okay, they're now it's just automatic thing where they become the generals on the Clone War. Why not? And then, of course, then seeing that 10 years in advance, they couldn't necessarily, Sith may not have seen 200 years in advance, but we know uh Dooku and Sidious, Tyrannus and Sidious were seeing this 10 years in advance, ordering this clone army with these inhibitor ships. Um, saying, oh yeah, they're gonna be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
Yeah.
Um. Well, I'll maybe look for it during the podcast, but
Mhm.
it's funny, you bring that up as well. Um, that sort of, people. It's funny that the intertwining of. Oh, there we go. Um, this is actually a quote from Plagueis. Plagueis gonna be brought up a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
why not? If he has something to say.
okay, so let's see what the Dark Lord of the Sith had to say about this whole Republic Jedi thing.
Go ahead, bro.
Um, Plagueis talking about the Jedi Republic relationship. Now again, this is Plagueis, so we gotta take a little bit of grain of salt.
Yeah,
He
he
says
is an evil character.
that's true. He's talking to Palpatine, talking to Sidious. He says, "Do you see the grand error of their ways?" He's talking about the Jedi. They execute the Republic's business as if it were the business of the Force. But has a political body ever succeeded in being the arbiter of what is right and just? How easy it is then to bask in the self-assurance in their castle on Coruscant. But in doing so, they have rendered themselves ill-equipped for the world we have spent millennia bringing into being. He cleared his throat. We are going to back them into a contradiction, Darth Sidious. We're going to force them to confront the moral quandaries of their position and revel in their flaws by requiring them to oversee the conflict that plagued their vaunted republic. So yeah, he's basically saying
Yeah.
we're going to make a conflict for the Republic, and because the Jedi are so intertwined with the Republic, you're going to have to choose. What do you do? Do you stay out of it? But you can't stay out of it because it's going to affect everybody. So
Mhm.
you got to join. Everyone's got to join. So yeah, that's your problem, Jedi, and
Yeah.
we're going to get you. So yeah, how do you like the quote?
Well, and it reminded me there's this the deepest part of this, right? Is it's not just the Jedi interests, right? They say this is the will of the Force.
Right.
This is everything that grounds their sense of being and identity is to is to go along with the safety and security of the Republic, right?
Mhm.
Uh, God bless America.
God bless
And
the
again,
Republic.
that you can pray that that's fine, but yeah, to say, I mean, this is in the real world. This is as far as it went, is to say people who use trigger warning for homophobia and transphobia.
Mhm.
Uh, God's will is to restrict marriage to this one little thing. God's will is to is to let mothers with ectopic pregnancies risk dying because they can't access the healthcare they need. You know,
Right.
I know
This
that's
hurricane's an act
complicated.
of God. This
I
hurricane's
know
an act.
that's complicated, and I know with my day job that's also gets more complicated. But um, to say that it's God's will, there was this whole thing of having of seeing the her whole persecution complex, and this is related to that. The persecution complex of okay, of being feeling like evangelical Christianity was this oppressed minority, and so to have one of us, one of our people in places of power, to have an athlete, professional athlete, say, "Yeah, I think my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ." It was this big deal to say it's God's will for us to be that prominent. And again, I do think there can be a positive version of that,
Mhm.
but yeah, you can't argue with someone who thinks it's God's will, right? They're your soul. They're your done. If it's the will of the Force to be the generals of the Clone War, I mean, well, the best example of this, it's God's will to keep immigrants out of our country or your country, and
Mhm.
I mean, and that gets tied up with fears about human trafficking and all that nonsense. And it's not entirely nonsense, but you know, I mean, that's what I heard was people were all God is using ICE to save people from human trafficking when it was ICE was splitting up families and deporting people. you know, that's
Uh,
so so that that it gets at that level to
right.
say American security at all costs is God's will to
What's
protect me and mine. Yeah.
What's interesting is again, the Jedi don't make policy. They
Mm.
just execute the Republic's will. And one
Well,
more
they fight
quote.
the Clone War.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but what's interesting, one more
Mm.
quote, another Plagueis
Yeah.
quote. Plagueis has some great quotes on this, I think.
Yeah.
Again, we gotta take with a grain of salt because he's Plagueis.
But he's right though. It's a good analysis what he was saying.
So he's gonna talk
Yeah.
about like what he thinks Jedi should have done to not get them themselves in this
Yeah.
situation. Plagueis says, "If indeed they have been acting in accordance with the Force, how could we be succeeding in tipping the balance?
Right.
How could the dark side be gaining ground? In fact, Jedi have fallen away from their self-assigned duty, their noble past. Could they have prevented it? Perhaps by having remained in control of the Republic, by electing and re-electing Jedi Supreme Chancellors, or perhaps by absenting themselves completely from the affairs of the Republic, and
Mhm.
attending to their arcane rituals in the belief that right thinking by them would keep the Republic strong on the course. The galaxy tipped into the light instead of having allowed themselves to become marshals and enforcers. The Lucas line of marshals and enforcers.
Mhm.
They're space cops. They're space cops. And what's interesting is Plagueis's mindset, and it's very Plagueis mindset when you kind of think about it, because like
Yeah.
either the Jedi have to be the rulers of the Republic, which is what he wants to do. I'm a dark side Force user.
Yeah.
I'm going to rule the galaxy because I am special. I have the magic zappy fingers. Or the Jedi just need to completely distance themselves,
Yeah.
forget Republic, forget helping anybody, forget being marshals and enforcers, because sometimes you need marshals and enforcers. They can help. Um, and just be little monks in your temple,
Mhm.
thinking all day and sitting on your butt. Um, it's kind of interesting. It's like I don't think he's right on the two extreme.
No.
Like that's the Sith thing. Sith always thinks in absolutes, but there is something to be said about okay, what will how involved in this Republic thing do you get before it always nips you in the butt? And obviously, Plague is like you rule the Republic, or you don't get involved at all.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's like maybe the Ray film will think of that middle ground, in some way, or who knows? Because that's something we never really see the Jedi kind of have to deal with again,
Mhm.
post sequel. But that is kind of interesting, right? That's the
Yeah.
Plagueis solution to things.
He needs to read his High Republic history, and so does Palpatine, right? I mean,
Well, I mean that didn't exist when
yeah,
Bruce
I
was
know,
here.
but you know what I mean, right? I mean, that's one of the things. That's the thing I was watching out for with High Republic, and one of the things I love so much about it
Mhm.
is, the Jedi aren't in the High Republic aren't afraid of losing their power.
Right.
They're afraid of the nameless. They're afraid of, uh, obviously, the turning into husks because they're force sensitive. They're afraid of the thing that makes them who they are, being uh being this great threat to them and to
Mhm.
everyone else. They're afraid of losing their influence. Yeah, I mean, it's again, that quote it has, I think, says more about Plagueis and Palpatine than it does about the
Probably.
Jedi.
I just thought it was interesting
Um,
that was.
Although, I mean, that comes to mind. I wonder if John Jackson Miller was reading this, thinking about this, and saying, "Okay, let's write a story, coming out in a few weeks about how the Jedi are
Mm,
so fixated on contemplating how many angels Viego can dance on the head of a pin, and then let's send them out to a field trip to a pastoral visit to Quen
mhm.
and actually see the real goings on of the galaxy." Yeah, I mean, it does. If anything, though, it does. s- is it presage? Yeah, presage what the actual result would end up being. Right?
Right.
It's it all, in a way, they get forced into it. They get forced into those extremes. Right? They say, we got to go. That's the thing with Mace Windu. We got to go
Mhm.
take over the Senate. We got to go lead this coup. Got to break out the lightsaber, ignite the purple,
Mhm.
and pointed it at the Chancellor here,
Mhm.
or Emperor, whoever,
Mhm.
or we got to go away. Of course, that's also Sidious' solution, is for them to go away, like you said, dealing with their employment by dealing with their lives in Order 66.
It's
Yeah.
it's interesting. And we talked a little about remember that one video we did about Legends timeline and stuff
Mhm.
like that, and we talked about like the Jedi Lords and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It's interesting. Y- uh, that in some ways the Jedi kind of every time like the Jedi Lord thing.
Mhm.
Like sorry if you hear noise in the background.
It's okay.
That was another extreme, right? That was the Sith had pretty much destroyed the institutional republic. The Jedi had to kind of step up and become order and kings and law.
Yeah.
I'll make this my last part about in-universe stuff, then we can get to the more fun
Yeah.
of the examples. But like, yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, I think we've talked enough in universe.
Yeah.
Shall we discuss the fun of high drama?
Yeah.
High not high republic drama, sadly. Um, but yeah, Order 66 just in terms of sorry, my dad's doing stuff.
That's okay. Keep going.
Um
Power through.
Okay, so in terms of like just Order 66 at the moment, it really is the beginning of the third act of Episode 3. Episode 3 is such a fascinating film because it kind of sometimes feels like so many films in one. It's
Yeah.
kind of right, like you start just so in a different place where it's like General Grievous is your bad guy. We're hunting this Grievous guy, and then
Mhm.
Order 66, and then it's like whoa, like the everything just shifts.
Yeah.
so
I mean,
which you
everything happens. A bunch of stuff happens in between then, but
oh yeah. I know that, but like I mean,
yeah,
obviously it's built up, obviously, but like
true.
everything's now shifts. Now it's like it is Sidious and Vader who are the antagonists here
Hmm.
of this
True.
moment.
Yeah.
I know one of the reasons I love that moment is just such a scale of the galaxy and how spread thin the Jedi are, which was also part of the plan by that time of the Clone Wars. The Outer Rim sieges was to spread the Jedi
Yeah.
as far from each other as possible. So it's like you can't have all the council members together getting ready to take on Palpatine. They're all busy and isolated with their clone regiments. Um,
Mm.
and it's just such a good moment, and the music. Um, so I guess I'll ask you, Matthew. I'll start you off.
Yeah.
What's your favorite Order 66 murder? Who's your favorite death? Who do you like? Who do you and you have,
Oh,
and
shoot.
that's
That's a good
uh
question.
yeah. Who do you like seeing get off first? And have you ever seen before I ask? Have you ever seen um the like the reels of Order 66, like the behind
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
like
There's so many different ideas for it, right?
where Aayla Secura gets crushed by
Yeah.
the AT and Walker? But like who's your favorite like death? Like in terms of
I mean,
both the
just in terms
sadness.
of the coolness of how they do it, I like. I mean,
Mhm.
is it Kiadi Mundi with the on
Snowy
Canon
one.
Modia?
Uh,
Is that
Plo Koon.
that's Plo
It's,
Koon? Yeah,
yeah, Plo Koon's like Kingdom Morty.
that one's cool. I mean, I hesitate. I'm kind of nerding out a little bit.
Who died? Whose death
Yeah,
was more
like
epic?
Ayla, that
Mhm,
was an interesting. I mean, Ayla actually they do such a great job of
mhm,
showing the trust that she has. Like she's not even thinking about it at all.
right.
She's just they're just traipsing through Felucia, the beautiful green foliage, and
Mhm,
she's hunting down the separatists, hunting down the droids,
mhm.
and then they just stop. And she keeps going, they just stop, and all before she knows that she's being gunned down. It's
Oh,
yeah, it's the gut punch right there, right?
mhm.
This Jedi we don't really know much about, uh, until it, at least on screen, you don't see anything of really of her much, and yet, yeah, just very concise storytelling there. Yeah, I mean that's why I bring it up. It's so in our minds because I mean it's the climax of the prequel trilogy.
Mhm.
I keep on thinking about it as the climax even of the High Republic in a way. It's the end result ultimately. Again, we want to be careful about inevitability and linearity, but I do think that's ultimately where that's headed. And that's where my answer to where is this heading is Order 66.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, it's mythology too, so
Yeah,
we
and so and so in the mythology of Star
mhm,
Wars, yeah, it just again, well, that third act, and it makes for such incredibly tight third act, tight storytelling. There's a podcast, I forget what it's called. Start just this a narrative, film narrative storytelling,
mhm,
and the way you know it starts off just in the office, just very quiet and calm.
mhm.
You almost calm, sort of. I mean, it's this very dark moment. Anakin Skywalker finally turned to the dark side. I mean, we knew it was coming,
Right.
and then rises up, helps you're fulfilling your destiny, and then he makes the call,
Mhm.
and,
Ring ring.
he makes the call, and then everything Obi-Wan just
Order
slowing,
66.
and just the build, the gradual crescendo,
Mhm,
all the way to the literal crescendo, right?
mhm,
John Williams builds the orchestra out through this, um until Vader and the 501st are marching on the
mhm,
Jedi Temple. Yeah, I mean, what cements it as. I mean, the rest of Act Three, right? I mean, the Mustafar
right.
that really cements it as the greatest film of all time for me. But the leading up, like I mean, that's a great point. Is that where this film ends up is so different from where it began, right? Where it began is Obi-Wan and Anakin on this
It's an
fun
episode of Clone
adventure.
Wars live action.
You really, yeah, really, right?
Mhm,
And they're dropped into the Battle of Coruscant, and I
mhm,
love that shot. Yeah, where it ends up on such a
mhm,
deeply human level, and the deep, all-encompassing tragedy. It was
mhm,
only maybe that's why why Infinity War with the snap really hits, is because
mhm,
it brings back the feeling of disorientation, of great overwhelming crisis that we experienced with 9/11 and with COVID, right?
mhm.
It this it's this thing we we know and love it in these characters that we know and love, in this order that we know and love, we're
Mhm,
actually seeing it be taken from us in front of our eyes.
mhm.
And and that's the thing, we could going into the film, into the theater in 2005, we could have said, yeah, somehow the Jedi are done, they're not in the galaxy anymore. But we spent the last two films lots of time with them, assuming they're there, the order's there.
Mhm.
How do they go away? And the time, and that's the wild thing, is to say, yeah, George had all these ideas about all these different planets, and that the film was going to be the Clone War in all these different places, and they had to cut it down to this Obi-Wan, Anakin, Padme story. Um, but Order 66, the Obi-Wan, Anakin, Padme story on Mustafar is the frame in a way. I mean, it's the emotional
Right.
goal of the film, but that's built up at this crescendo with all these other, Felucia and Kid and Nemoidia, and the Jedi Temple, and
Mhm.
uh, all these other places, and Kashyyyk, right? I mean, that was a great moment, just Yoda,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know,
I love the
being able
Kashyyyk.
to see it happen, see it coming, and feel it coming. Um, yeah, it's a textbook case of how to how to write and how to do a third act. It's
And just a
yeah, and
good
so
segment too. It's like just the
yeah,
segment alone.
and
Even
and
the
what it does again, it heightens the importance of it to the galaxy. That's the thing, is it heightens the importance of it to the canon, the time he does take for it, and the drama and everything, the pathos that John Williams injects. Again, it does, um, it really serves to help us understand. Yeah, this is, like you said, one of the great climaxes in all of Star Wars. Yeah.
but here's what makes Order 66 even more interesting.
Mhm.
It is a climax, but it's also a beginning.
Yes.
Because look how many characters outside of the saga of of the 9 movie saga. Well, I mean, I guess it's the prequels of just
Yeah.
itself. Um, it's the start. It's the true start of their adventure. It is
Yeah.
the true beginning. It is Cal Kestis's beginning, Kanan's beginning. Also, it's the Bad Batch's beginning.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's their true
No, it is.
beginning.
It really is. I mean, that's true.
It's let's see, it's Grogu's beginning. I get Grogu's beginning, Reva's beginnings, really.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, the only person who's really sort of the climax for outside of Anakin, Obi-Wan, Padme is Ahsoka. I think she's the only one who kind of has more of a
Yes.
that's more of a climax, but that's because her
Sort
story.
of,
Well, her
but not.
story started earlier, so
Yeah.
compared
So
to
so for the Clone Wars series, and that's the thing,
right.
is that's also what makes Clone Wars the greatest show of all time. Uh, I'm biased here, but yeah, they the Clone Wars itself, it is the high drama, and
Mhm.
of course, um, those that second last episode really taps into the drama of Order 66, but from the perspective of the new characters that we followed through
Right.
this series, especially Ahsoka and Rex. So yeah, no, that's a great point. It's the midpoint. It is the climax of the prequels.
Mhm.
It's the third act of the first half of the third act of Revenge of the Sith.
Mhm.
It's the midpoint of the Skywalker saga, or of sorry, of the George Lucas films, if you want to say, Republic, Empire,
Right.
Rebellion. It's the midpoint. You know, you can, in a way, you could say it's the end of the first act of the Skywalker saga,
That's true. Yeah, yeah. The 9
because
films. The 9.
if you want to say, that Rise of Skywalker is the climax, right? The ultimate defeat of the Sith. Um, yeah, but that's a great point. Is it's a starting place for all these other stories that are focused on what do we do now? Who do we be now? That very question. What does it mean to be a Jedi not in the Republic? Without a Republic, what does it mean to be a Jedi when the Republic is actually your enemy, as
When there's
opposed
no
to be your
order
ally?
anymore.
And that there's no order, there's no institution. You're right. And so for Kanan and Ezra, you know, it's kind of backstory, but I love that we get that comic with Caleb, right? That and that's still there, and especially in issue number 2, you know, that really does explore that question that I'm so fascinated by of what does it mean to be a Jedi in the dark times. That my favorite legend story. I like it more than, frankly, more than Darth Plagueis. I love Darth Plagueis, but Dark Times, um, that comic really, all the different choices those characters have to make, both compromise or holding firm. And you see with Kanan and Ezra and Grogu and Cal finding, uh, yeah, finding who they are and finding what it means really to be a Jedi. It's getting, that Yoda, talking about the Yoda quote from the novelization, will still be Jedi. you know,
Right.
yeah, the institution's done, but there's more to being a Jedi than being part of the institution, right?
More than
It,
just your card, your membership card.
where's the membership card? And I think one of the things, just to do the theology time again, one of the things that the Reformation reminded us, no, none of the Luther and Calvin and them would say, you know, they wouldn't never deny being part of a community,
Mhm.
a church community with its rules and institutions. That's essential to being Christian, but there's more to being a Christian than being part of the church, right? I'm talking about the will of the force, the will of God. Um, and well, what that is, what they do, some of them go the way seeker route, some of them go solo. Cal in Jedi Survivor, he is solo, and that's not enough. He actually has to go and find people. Kanan, in A New Dawn, he has to go and actually connect with Hera. It's not enough. And so Ray goes, tries to find Luke, um, ultimately convinces him to help
Mhm.
train with Leia. It's interesting. We're just assuming,
Mhm.
and I think we're assuming rightly, that she's building a community around her in this new film. She's not running around trying to figure it out on her own. That's the weird thing with Ahsoka, right? I mean, that's the whole
Mhm.
thing with Ahsoka. You know, in the Ahsoka series, she starts off as a lone wolf here,
Mhm.
but that's because she was afraid of training Sabine. Afraid of training Grogu and afraid of training Sabine. It was out of fear. It's when she actually faces that fear that she's able to actually reach out and connect. And now, her and Sabine are on Peridia, and who knows what happens with Shin. So, yeah, it's that's the thing, is it's this Order 66 is this great moment of isolation, of separation, of death and destruction.
Mhm.
But the Force
Mhm.
continues on, carries on, drawing Jedi to reach out and connect with others, and build up families with others. I mean, that's Kanan. I mean, that's why Kanan and Hera, yeah, suck face.
Yeah.
Get it on, like be a couple, because
Get a
Kanan is
literal
being,
kid. Get a lit-
yeah, because Kanan is truly being a Jedi in that moment with Hera, by forming that family with Zeb and Sabine, and ultimately with Ezra too. So yeah, it that's the thing about crisis, right? Even the most tragic crisis. I mean, that's the thing with our Republic, for example. It provokes us to go back to first principles. It provokes us to go back to, why do we exist? Why do we do what we do? What do we need to continue, and what do we need to let go of? And it's taken, 6 subsequent films and then an extra film after that for Ray to be able to start answering that question. I do think Ahsoka is going to start answering that question too.
That'd be
Maybe
interesting.
Luke. Luke is having his own answer to that too. But
Right. I know you were talking about the way Order 66 is different things depending on what you're looking at.
yeah,
I think that's interesting because we kind of have talked about the evolution of Star Wars.
Hmm.
right? What is Order 66 in the context of just Lucas's Six sagas
Yeah.
film? What is Order 66 now in the context of a 9 movie saga? 10 years, 20 years down the line, what's Order 66 going to be in the context of a more fleshed out Star Wars galactic history,
Hmm.
which we're seeing with High Republic, but even before then.
Yeah.
I remember reading, I think this is in Light of the Jedi, might be Rising Storm. The Jedi said, we've been purged before, we bounced back. Um, in Legends, Jedi purge has happened more than once. Happened in the KOTOR.
Hmm.
Obviously, it happened in Legacy. I guess it happened again in canon with Luke. His Jedi purge.
Yeah.
His academy went kabooly.
Such a small scale.
That's
But
true. It was a little bit larger scale, and I guess the only way I've always kind of reconciled it with Legends is that
mhm,
this was such a complete,
yes.
utter disaster purge, while the other ones were a little bit more. Jedi Council was still around, and
Mhm.
obviously, maybe they got dwindled to still 100 Jedi still, but they kind of still had a bit more of a footing going on. Um,
Were those books written before or after, or published before or after 2005?
let's see, when did KOTOR 2 happen?
Oh yeah, so it would have been before, right?
But a year. That's true. I guess
So
no one really knew what Order 66 was going to be. So yeah,
yeah,
like 1 year.
but
Legacy
again, I
was.
mean, they had to have known. I mean, again,
Well,
you
everyone knew
have
the
the
Jedi.
original
Well,
trilogy, and the Jedi
yeah.
are gone in the original trilogy.
Well, yeah, that's true. So everyone kind of knew the Jedi were gone. We just didn't know how bad the purge was,
Yeah, I
or
mean,
what
that's
the.
the thing. Order 66 makes us think about it.
That's true.
Yeah,
So it'll be interesting. Is this the first time the Jedi have had to deal with a big problem like this, or is this one of the worst examples in their long history? Because we
mhm,
talked about what is Star Wars.
yeah,
I think you can make a good argument. The history of Star Wars is the history of the Jedi Order and their many struggles throughout 25,000 years of being a
mhm,
thing. So it'd be interesting to kind of look at the context of Order
yeah,
66 and the wider history of the Jedi and see, well, what does this compared to other crises the Jedi have dealt through? Because they have probably dealt through more than one crisis in 25,000 years. Religions kind of
yeah.
do that.
You think?
You think.
Yeah,
So, that's something I think about. It's kind of our last thing we can talk about.
yeah. I mean, this is a real world perspective thing, right?
Right.
Is the concern with other purges and legends is and other crises is uh does it if it approaches the magnitude of Order
Hmm.
66, does that cheapen the film experience of Revenge of the Sith, right? Um,
Right.
so I mean that's why the Nile really can't have that much of an impact. They have an impact, and it's important impact. This is get what Claudia Gray was talking about at Comic
Mm.
Con, right? Saying
Right.
there's a reason this High Republic initiative is happening. They have a story to tell, and it affects maybe what we think of uh the prequel trilogy and what happens, but you know it can't take it should only enhance that. It can't take away from it.
I'm thinking
So
more like when you get further back, like 5,000 years,
yeah, but even
12,000.
when we see a story,
Mhm.
I don't know, maybe, but I think I mean there it is possible, right? It might not cheapen it. I mean, we'll have to. I mean, this is talking about our own perception of this fictional story,
That is true. That's
right?
true.
Is what
What
I'm
does
getting at
cheapen
here.
mean? What is cheap?
Yeah, it's a perception of a fictional story. In terms of history, I mean, I but I do to say that I do want to
Mhm.
still sit with
Mhm.
the historical importance that, and it's the historical importance of the whole Skywalker saga, right?
Right.
We've had this. We talked about this a few months ago. The Skywalker films, I think, are supposed to be the most important things that have ever happened in the galaxy ever. Um, and that's just a weird claim because it's not how history actually works.
It'd be like saying World War II. We're
Which
in the World War II saga.
you're right. It's like seeing World War II or the Reformation or
Right.
Great Schism, or the fall of the Roman Empire.
Mhm.
Maybe the fall of the Roman Empire was the most important thing to happen in history ever,
Maybe.
at least in the West.
Mhm.
That's the other
Eh,
thing is it's only in the
eh,
West. But even
China, on the
then,
other hand, is like, yeah, we're doing fine. Chinese Empire.
how do you? I mean, yeah. Well, how do you measure that,
Right.
right? Um, without it being an apocalypse, that's the other thing. Without it being this sort of
Mhm.
end times thing, end time story. I guess
Mhm.
say the way I don't know, Battlestar Galactica tries to be. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because in canon we don't have anything comparable yet.
No, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm excited for Acolyte, and I love
yeah,
High Republic, but it's still very much in the periphery of the
yeah,
Skywalker saga. Where
yeah,
Dawn of the Jedi, the weird one
yeah.
because
That's
yeah,
gonna be the closest. Yeah,
it's 25,000 years, but at the same time, it's like it's about the formation of the Jedi, which is kind of important to the Skywalker saga
yeah,
a little bit. But
for
it's
sure.
not like one day the Revan Wars, Episode 1,
Yeah,
5,000 years before, and then it's a six-part Revan War saga.
as cool as that would be.
As cool as it would be, it's sort of like,
We're getting it.
in terms of important historical things that,
Mhm.
like, is this going to be on the same level as the
Yeah,
Skywalker saga or not? I mean, we just don't have that. That's the thing, and whether or not that happens
yeah.
one day, I don't know. I really don't.
It'll have to be this real world storytelling choice.
Yeah.
Like it was a real world storytelling choice
Mhm.
in Legends to tell all these stories. And it was an odd choice to tell them. Got the comment here. Um, just before, but kind of around there. Obviously, there wasn't the story group as we know it today. There was, um, not too long after. But I mean, that's the thing. That's a good point. You bring up this the Dawn of the Jedi film. That might be the closest thing we get to something as historically significant.
Mhm.
However, I'm suspecting it's going to be, kind of like with like Abraham again, bringing the biblical parallel here. You
Mhm.
know, with one family, with one group of people, like we have with Legends, right? The Dawn of the Jedi. It's just this one little group of people on Tython, um, and then everything that happens with Bogon. But you know, it's not going to feel as big unless it does eventually, and that's the biblical epic. If it has kind of the scope of maybe the Silmarillion, for
Well,
example.
that's actually kind of the interesting thing about how I mean,
Yeah,
I'll try to back this up, but I don't wanna
yeah,
get too much into it, but, like, it's kinda the interesting
yeah,
thing about the Legends thing is, though,
yeah.
retroactively, they did make it important. So, like, I'm thinking of not Dawn of the Jedi, Tales of the Jedi.
Hmm.
See, the War of Exar Kun stuff. That was a bit
Yeah,
self-contained, that wasn't a big Silmarillion thing, but then that led to the Revan Wars, and then, the
yeah.
game built upon those books. That was and then, the Old Republic MMO happened,
Hmm.
and then the Bane stuff happens, and
Yeah.
that is building upon Tales of Jedi and the Revan stuff, and then
That
the
yeah.
Plagueis book happens, and that's building upon, obviously Saga, but like it's building upon Bane and Revan and Exar Kun and all those tales. So it's
Yeah.
like it's not a grand Silmarillion book, but more like here's a bunch of stories, and then eventually this is how it all kind of eventually leads back into the thing you like.
Especially the Bane thing,
Mhm,
and just thinking again. I mean, Malachor
mhm.
and whatever it is, this thing that leads to the Galactic Republic as we know it this 1,000 years before. That might also be kind of comparable, but yeah, to Order 66. But yeah,
Yes, but
like if you're doing like the bullet points
Mhm.
of galactic history, yeah, Order 66 has to be at the top, right? That's kind of what we're getting at here in terms of Jedi history.
It's certainly a
Um,
big deal, I would hope. I
and
would.
then like, but that's the thing. Say Order 66 and then Ray. That's how history works.
That's true.
Yeah.
Or founding of the Jedi Sith War, last Jedi Sith War, Order 66, then Ray,
Yeah.
or something like that. I've
I mean, you could maybe mention a subheading Nihil threat if you
yeah,
want.
yeah. Now Threat 2, probably.
But again, that's the whole conversation we had a number of months ago of, okay, that's because we're getting these big publishing initiatives in times,
Right.
and then the third act of a major blockbuster film and all these other stories around it. Um,
And hopefully more blockbuster films to come.
yeah.
So yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's this funny thing of what's our perception of Star Wars history. Well, what would help again? Can we have some exposition? We have, I don't know, Beaumont Kin talking about this. I mean, Beaumont Kin, that in the Chris Hemshaw book,
Hmm?
that's probably going to mention it.
Oh yeah.
Uh, saying, "Oh yeah, the rise of the Galactic Empire. It's gotta." You'd think it'd be devoted a good chunk of it to it.
It's kind of the kickoff,
Yeah.
right?
So,
Um,
but say someone like Beaumont Kin or Ray, but even in this Shamina Obeid Chinoy film,
mhm,
well, even in the Last Jedi, right? You have Luke saying
right.
the quote, right? It'll be what these characters sense of that history is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, Ray's got to live up to 25,000 years of history,
I'll
and
say one thing. We did have an event, again, bring my day job in, but the Second Vatican Council
mhm,
in the 60s. And it might seem obscure to some people who don't know what have never heard of it.
mhm,
But I mean, if you have any kind of sense of Catholicism or Christianity being any at all relevant to the world today at all, if you think what Pope Francis says, some things he's saying that are kind of neat, kind of cool, kind of interesting, that he cares about energy transition and global warming and all that. He would be the first person to say, yeah, Vatican II. Really was this moment of decision of we're actually going to uh, dance with the change, even if there are things that we have to give up and lose. We're going to actually uh, be a part of, we're going to step out and make a positive contribution to our communities and not fight against the change as much. Yeah, that we're only 60 years out of that. And we're now, so that is an interesting parallel. You know, I'm not saying it was as bad as Order. I'm saying it was a very great thing.
right.
Um, but yeah, it was 60 years off, underscoring the historical significance in the context of the previous few centuries. Yeah, I think that kind
Well,
of thing. Again, we're only now 60 years later coming to grips is the word. I can use words. Coming to
grips.
grips with it. So that's interesting. Ray, so coming to grips, and maybe one of the things she'll say, what if there's a Sava out there who writes a book saying, writes this kind of theological reflection of saying the Force allowed Order 66 to happen, so that all these new things, not because the Force wills that level of death, but use the circumstances to create all these new stories, these new people, and to get us back to our principles of who we are as Jedi. That'd be fascinating. That would be interesting. I wonder if
That'd
there's
be
room in the Ray film or somewhere for that,
that'd be interesting. I mean,
or
it
a
also
novel by
depends.
Claudia Gray. I don't know.
I mean, depends on if that's something Lucasfilm wants to kind of promote as an idea. I could also see George being like, "That's not what that was about at all." Uh,
I think you'd be open to see. Well, not to say that the Force willed it, but that that the Force used the circumstances. Yeah, I mean, Yoda, the greatest
that's
teacher failure is.
that's true.
That's what he's saying.
I mean, you
You know,
had to figure out what to do because chosen one blew it.
yeah,
you went Roman. But
that's
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and I guess I'll finish up by saying, it's not the games or comics' fault that I mean, I don't want even to say Order 66 was cheapened in the wider sense of Star
no,
Wars.
yeah, fair.
Um, and I'll be curious to see what the powers that be in terms of who's pitching ideas and whatnot, like
Mhm,
in terms of like
yeah,
do story group get a feeling like, oh, this is cheapening Order 66, we don't want to do this. I mean, obviously I think if someone just decides to do Order 66 again, but in the past, yeah, probably I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that either. But it's like if the Jedi are going through a tough time, that's the question of like, well, is this cheapening Order 66 because the Jedi are like have been somewhat purged and their numbers are down and the Sith rule? Because we know the Sith are gonna do rule the galaxy for a little bit.
Yeah.
Or the story group like as is different enough. We're okay with it. But
Yeah.
that's gonna be all about the creative and who that is, and that's a story for another time, to
It
quote
is.
Maz. So I think
Yeah.
should we wrap up and you ask Order 66 thoughts?
Yeah. I'll keep that. Bring that back. Yeah. I mean, definitely. Where am I? What am I doing?
Order 66,
That one.
that one.
Yeah. There we go. 2 hours in. Yeah. Again. Greatest film of all time.
One of the greatest moments in Star Wars.
One of the things that we all come around and say, what an idea, right? What a storytelling idea. What a plan by Sidious and Tyrannus.
More Sidious. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Tyrannus helped a little bit.
What a way of expressing these real world questions. And the again, and I'm curious, the question I've loved about that Dark Times comic, Canon comic. I love about all these stories we have. Obi-Wan Kenobi. You mentioned Reva. What does it mean to be a Jedi without an order and without a
Jedi Fallen
republic?
Order. Your favorite.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories, one of our favorite stories.
Mhm.
What makes us so compelling is who is Cal
Mhm.
and what does he care about and what is he willing to do? And he's willing to spoiler alert, destroy this holocron to protect the identity of these kids because that's more important than forming an army to take out the Empire. It's another way. I mean, that's the thing. Order 66 and how evil and dark it is leaves the space then for Rose to say, this is actually how we win, not by killing what we hate, but by saving what we love. And so it kicks off all these other stories that we know and love too. So, yeah.
Exactly. Well, that time came, and now the Jedi Rebellion has been foiled. But Jedi will rise again.
But the Jedi rise again, and the Iron Canon podcast will come back in. This was one of the great conversations. This was all. Oh, we don't have much notes. Oh, we have lots to talk about.
We should do more of these. Just like let's just focus on a moment in Star Wars
Yeah.
canon history and just
and why it matters.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a good time to rack things up. Thanks everyone for joining in the comments. I think we have some newer comments. Bull Run. Thanks for joining. Thanks for chatting. Book of Theories. Hello there. Thomas. I don't know the answer to this. I know Alex Damon did a What Are the Other Orders video on Star Wars Explained. So check that out. Yeah, good. Thanks everyone for the comments. The comments are still there. Let us know what you think, what your the best Order 66 death, what you think of Order 66, what you think about all the real world implications, the storytelling, its place in history, in galactic history, etc., etc. I'm sure Chris Kemschel will have something to say about that in Rise of the Galactic Empire. Definitely looking forward to that book coming up. So yeah, if you comment below, if you haven't done so already, like this video, subscribe to the Underworld channel, and to the Facebook page as well. Give this video like and share, retweet, etc., etc. Yeah, let's go to plugs again. Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at GID2021. Again, GID2021 on Twitter. And of course, you can follow us at the Ion Cannon Pod.
Ion Cannon, not the.
I do that. I wish we did put the. At EYEONCANONPOD.
Yes, at Ion Cannon Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Ion Cannon Pod. Follow me on Instagram and Threads at MNEUG1138, on Twitter at NEUG485. Of course, also at Ion Cannon Pod. Doing a little bit here and there. Yeah, hopefully getting those Comic-Con things out. We'll see. Again, I keep making these promises. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Might have to figure something out. Yeah, and then again, check out the flagship. Check out Tractor Beam. this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We got a whole bevy of comics to get through, including Django Fett, including Thrawn Alliance's number 3. We finally see the Grisk. What do the Grisk look like? They're fine. It'll be interesting. Yeah, so Chris back from his convention escapades to chat with that right here again on the Underworld YouTube channel and Facebook page and Twitch and Twitter and all those wonderful places where we get all these wonderful Twitter bots and joining us as well.
Like the video and leave comments is good
Yes.
for the algorithm.
Yes. So if you're a real person, if you're a real human being, please like the video and leave a comment. If you can. Yeah, please do that. That'll be great. For the algo, picking us up, good for our numbers and supporting the channel. And super chats, of course, and YouTube memberships, definitely supporting the channel. Check out the Discord in the link below. Say hi to Joel. I'm in there too. You can say hi to me too. I'm in there. I'll get a notification, but definitely ask Joel a question. Ask Ben when his birthday is. See what happens. There we go. Yeah, that about does it. Yeah, until then, next week, Easter Monday, we are gonna record. I'll be awake. I'll be there. Easter Monday, we're talking about Force Ghosts, and maybe
they have risen.
They've risen from the dead. Definitely got more theology time in there. It being the season for theology time. But yeah. Till then, let's blow this thing and head home.